The Chancellor in the budget also announced a raft of public spending pledges from new government research facilities to repairing potholes. He also promised to put £1 billion into a new building safety fund to remove all kinds of unsafe cladding.
Expert advice is clear that new public funding must concentrate on removing unsafe materials from high-rise residential buildings. So today I am creating a new building safety fund worth £1 billion. That is what the experts have called for. That is what the Select Committee has called for. That is even what the opposition have called for. That new fund will go beyond dealing with ACM to make sure that all unsafe combustible cladding will be removed from every private and social residential building above 18 metres high.
Well, Dawn, £1 billion, it shows the Chancellor is taking this issue seriously. You must welcome that.
Of course I welcome any removal of unsafe cladding, but I have constituents in Brent who have written to me saying that cladding is going to be removed, but they're still going to receive a bill for the removal, or a bill for some of it, which is an awful lot of money that people can't afford and wasn't built into any agreements that they signed in the beginning.
What money are they going to have to pay? What's the bill?
One of them was something like £14,000 or something. It was a lot of money, which they just haven't got. So we need to look at the detail of this, because often what happens is the Chancellor will make an announcement, and then when it comes to the detail, that's where you find the devil in the detail.
So what happens when they get this bill and they can't pay it?
Oh, well, some unfortunately go to extreme lengths to try and pay it. Some lose their homes, especially when they're elderly as well, where some people have bought their property many years ago, and then all of a sudden we have lots of cases where the roof's fixed, for instance, and they get a bill of £5,000 because the roof has been fixed, and they can't afford that because they're just struggling to pay, you know, to pay their daily expenses.
Rachael, the government should be footing the bill for all of this, shouldn't they?
The government is footing the bill for it. So, for example, we had 6 towers in Westminster which had to have the cladding removed. It was similar to what was on Grenfell, and the government did fund the removal and the recladding. So that's, I think, something that's
So why do you think some of Dawn's constituents are having to pay themselves?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that. But I really welcome the fact that the government stepped in and it said that they would take responsibility for funding this.
Sian, it's shameful, isn't it? 3 years on that we're still having this conversation.
And £1 billion is actually nowhere near enough. In the London Assembly last week, we passed a motion calling for the government to pay for much more than just cladding, because there are fire safety problems inside blocks as well. It's only being restricted to tall buildings. There are fire safety problems in buildings that are not as high as 18 metres as well. We've got estimates that between like £5 and £7 billion is the cost to housing associations alone in London alone. So £1 billion is not going to go very far with this problem at a national level.
Yeah, I guess really it just demands money, doesn't it? And it's something that the government, yes, well, £1 billion is a significant amount. When we're looking at the likes of I've seen one housing association say, or one housing association say that they need £4 billion, you've seen £5 to £7 billion. The pot needs to come from the government, doesn't it?
I think so, because otherwise there's no way that local authorities can do this. These are works that need to happen. So the government does need to work with us on this, and they are doing so.
But why do you think they've taken so long on this? Do you think it's inertia? Do you think that it's not a political issue anymore? Out of sight, out of mind? People aren't talking about it as much as they were a couple of years ago?
No, I certainly wouldn't say that. I mean, I think they've been working at pace since Grenfell. We've all learnt a lot of lessons, which we absolutely needed to learn and which we're putting into place. And I think the government's taken the time to make sure that the highest standards are now in place.
But I suppose for people who live in these high-rise buildings with this cladding, they don't have time. They're terrified that the same thing could happen to them. And the awful stark reality
I completely
is
agree, and that's why on the towers in Westminster we took off the cladding within 3 months. So it came off.
I don't think they've been working at pace. We've brought this issue on the floor of the House time and time again over 3 years. You've had MPs in tears on the floor of the House asking the government to act. You know, there's been Prime Minister's questions. This is not what I call working at pace.
I think the government's been hoping the problem would solve itself with taking its time in putting out any public money, hoping that the housing associations would find the money some other way, that the residents would cough up. But actually, it cannot be done. They need to be putting public money into this because it's a matter of public safety.
But the government has been putting public money into it, and
no,
certainly,
it hasn't.
Certainly,
nothing like as much.
Well, certainly, I can speak from our own local authority buildings that the government has put money into helping with the cost of the cladding.
With you said 3 towers, but there
Six,
will be buildings lower than that. There will be lots of buildings that have had shoddy internal works, leaving compartmentation problems. We see that right across all the way through the buildings across London, and the housing associations have built recently and had refurbished recently. There are these enormous faults. It isn't just about cladding.
No, I agree. There's a huge
And the
amount
18 metres seems very arbitrary, doesn't it? I don't know what the thinking is by deciding that it only applies to buildings over 18 metres. Anyway, yeah, much more to come on this.